The crystalline spires of the Galactic Council's judgment chamber stretched impossibly high above Ambassador David Kane, as security drones escorted him through the entrance. Each step echoed through the vast space, amplified by acoustics designed to make individuals feel insignificant before the collective power of galactic civilization. Thousands of alien representatives filled tiered seats that spiraled upward into shadow, their forms creating a living mosaic of scales, tentacles, crystalline bodies, and bioluminescent patterns that pulsed with barely contained anticipation. Kane forced himself to walk steadily, despite the weight of knowing that every camera feed, every sensor array, every communication channel in the galaxy was focused on this moment. Humanity's first formal appearance before the council that governed over 14,000 worlds had become something far more dangerous than a diplomatic meeting. Intelligence reports intercepted just hours earlier had revealed the truth that would change everything. High Chancellor Zerion, a massive cephalopod whose translucent body revealed the complex neural networks that made his species the galaxy's premier administrators, raised one of his 12 tentacles for silence. The cacophony of alien voices immediately ceased, leaving only the hum of atmospheric processors working to accommodate dozens of different environmental requirements in the same space. The trial was supposed to be a formality. Humanity had submitted their application for full council membership 6 months ago, presenting themselves as a young but promising species eager to contribute to galactic civilization. Their technology appeared primitive but showed potential. Their military capabilities seemed negligible, but indicated willingness to learn. Their cultural development suggested they would be grateful junior partners in the established order. But something had gone wrong with the Council's carefully orchestrated plan. Standing in the defendant's circle beneath the Judgment Dome, Kane appeared calm and composed. His dark suit was unremarkable by galactic standards, his physical appearance typical of his species, his demeanor respectful but not subservient. To the assembled aliens, he looked exactly like what they expected from humanity, a representative of a species that had clawed its way to basic space travel and was now desperately hoping for acceptance among their betters. They had no idea how catastrophically wrong their assessment had been. High Chancellor. Zerion's massive form shifted, causing ripples of bioluminescence to cascade across his transparent skin. When he spoke, his words were transmitted through the chamber's universal translation matrix, ensuring every species present could understand the proceedings. Ambassador Kane of the human species, you stand before this council under charges of falsifying your civilization's development status and concealing critical information during the integration assessment process. How do you answer these accusations? Kane's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes that made several of the more perceptive council members shift uncomfortably in their seats. He had expected this moment, prepared for it, even orchestrated it. The charges weren't surprising because humans had been monitoring council communications for months, watching as the galaxy's ruling body debated how to handle the problematic new species that didn't fit their established categories. Before I respond to your charges, High Chancellor, I must ask you to clarify something for the assembled representatives. When exactly did this council vote to implement the Harvest Protocol for Earth? The chamber erupted. Shocked, chittering, angry roars and panicked fluttering filled the air as representatives realized their most classified deliberations had been compromised. The Harvest Protocol was supposed to be completely secret, known only to the council's core leadership, and implemented only after careful preparation and absolute security. High Chancellor Zerion's bioluminescent patterns shifted to deep red warning colors. Ambassador Kane, I don't know what you think you're implying, but unauthorized access to council proceedings is a serious violation of Resolution 17 Alpha 77. Kane interrupted, his voice carrying clearly through the chaos. Passed 8 days ago by a margin of 912 votes to 61. The systematic extraction of Earth's mineral wealth, the relocation of human populations to designated labor facilities, and the conversion of our solar system into a resource depot for council operations. Would you like me to continue reading from your classified proceedings, or shall we dispense with this charade? The silence that followed was absolute. Every alien representative was staring at the lone human standing in their judgment circle, trying to process how a supposedly primitive species had gained access to information that should have been impossible for them to obtain. More importantly, they were beginning to realize that if humans had been monitoring their communications, then everything about the integration process had been compromised from the beginning. Kane reached into his diplomatic pouch and withdrew a small device that made several species recoil in recognition. It was a quantum communication array, technology that required mastery of theoretical physics that should have been centuries beyond human capability. The device's mere existence suggested that humanity's technological assessment had been deliberately falsified on a massive scale. You see, Kane continued conversationally, while you were busy planning our exploitation, we were busy learning everything about you. Your security protocols, your hidden communications, your private deliberations. We know about the slave colonies you've hidden from younger species. We know about the systematic elimination of civilizations that refuse to comply with Council directives. We know about the biological weapons deployed against resistant populations. High Chancellor Zerion's form was now pulsing with urgent orange patterns. Even if your intelligence gathering is accurate, Earth lacks the military capability to threaten Council operations. Your species possesses no significant fleet, no advanced weapon systems, no. Kane smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. It was not a pleasant expression. High Chancellor, I think you've made a fundamental miscalculation about my species. You assumed that because we appeared eager to join your community, we were naive. Because our technology seemed primitive, we were helpless. Because we presented ourselves as grateful for your guidance, we were weak. The quantum communicator in his hand began pulsing with soft blue light. But humanity has survived ice ages, supervolcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, and our own attempts at self-destruction. We are the descendants of persistence hunters who tracked prey across continents and survivors, who thrived in environments that would kill most species in this chamber. We learned long ago that survival requires adaptation, and we've been adapting to galactic reality since the moment we made first contact. The blue light on his communicator pulsed faster. So let me answer your charges, High Chancellor. Yes, we falsified our development status. Yes, we concealed critical information during your assessment. Yes, we are a threat to the established order, but not in the way you think. Kane looked up at the thousands of alien faces staring down at him with growing alarm. We didn't discover your plans yesterday. We've known about the Harvest Protocol since the day it was first proposed. We've been preparing for this moment for months. The communicator's light turned solid, white. Consider this humanity's formal declaration that we are withdrawing from all negotiations with the Galactic Council. Furthermore, we now consider every species that voted for the Harvest Protocol to be in a state of active hostility with Earth. High Chancellor Zerion's bioluminescent patterns were now blazing with alarm. You cannot threaten this council. Your species lacks the technology, the numbers, the resources to. Kane pressed a button on his communicator. Every holographic display in the chamber activated simultaneously, showing the same impossible image. The view of space above Earth where thousands of sleek, predatory warships hung in perfect formation. These were not the primitive vessels the Council had observed during humanity's integration assessment. These craft gleamed with advanced armor and weapon systems that clearly represented technology far beyond what any Council evaluation had detected. The fleet that appeared on screen dwarfed anything in Council military doctrine. Worse, the ships displayed design elements that incorporated technologies from dozens of different Council species, suggesting that humanity had been studying and improving upon alien technology for far longer than anyone had suspected. Your Harvest fleet arrived in our system 4 hours ago. Kane announced over the chaos erupting throughout the chamber. As of this moment, every ship in that fleet has been disabled and their crews taken into protective custody. They are unharmed, but their vessels now belong to the Human Defense Force. The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembled representatives. The Council's enforcement fleet had been considered invincible, equipped with the most advanced technology available to galactic civilization. The idea that a single species could neutralize such a force without causing casualties suggested capabilities that exceeded every assessment. In Council records, this communication is being broadcast simultaneously to every government, military installation, and news network in the galaxy. Kane continued. Along with complete, Admiral Victoria Cross stood on the command bridge of the Dreadnought Defiance, watching through reinforced viewports as Earth rotated slowly beneath the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. The massive armada surrounding her flagship represented 30 years of secret construction, hidden shipyards, and the most sophisticated deception operation in galactic history. Every vessel bore the sleek, predatory design that had shocked the Council just hours earlier. But their true capabilities remained concealed behind layers of stealth, technology that surpassed anything in alien databases. Priority. Transmissions flooded the communication channels as reports arrived from across the galaxy. The Council's reaction to Ambassador Kane's declaration had been swift and predictable. Enforcement fleets were mobilizing throughout Council space, targeting human settlements that appeared defenseless and isolated. What they didn't realize was that those settlements had been carefully positioned and prepared for exactly this scenario. Commander Blake approached her station with the latest intelligence summary. Admiral, we're receiving confirmation from all sectors. The Council's enforcement operations are proceeding exactly as our strategic models predicted. They're targeting what they believe are our most vulnerable colonies while mobilizing their main battle fleets for a direct assault on Earth. Cross nodded grimly. For 3 decades, human intelligence services had been mapping every aspect of Council military doctrine, studying their tactics, identifying their weaknesses, and preparing countermeasures. The aliens' approach to warfare was methodical and overwhelming, designed to crush resistance through superior numbers and firepower. It was an effective strategy against species that fought conventional battles. But humanity had learned different lessons from their violent history. Put me through to all fleet commanders, Cross ordered. The main screen divided into dozens of sections, each showing the face of a human captain positioned throughout the galaxy. Some commanded vessels disguised as cargo haulers. Others led squadrons hidden in asteroid fields or concealed behind planetary bodies. For 3 decades, they had maintained the facade of grateful junior members of galactic civilization, while secretly establishing the most sophisticated military network the galaxy had ever seen. Ladies and gentlemen, Cross began, Operation Revealed Hand is now active. All pretense ends as of this moment. Execute your primary objectives. Captain Rodriguez of the stealth destroyer Phantom was positioned near the Alterian core worlds, where 3 Council species maintained their primary military academies. Admiral, the Alterians are broadcasting surrender demands to human agricultural settlements in their sector. They're expecting to find farmers with basic defense satellites. Show them why that expectation is incorrect, Cross replied. Across the galaxy, the truth about human preparations began revealing itself. The agricultural colonies that Council forces expected to capture without resistance turned out to be heavily fortified installations disguised as farming communities. Weather satellites revealed themselves to be orbital weapons platforms. Cargo ships dropped their camouflage to become warships that outclassed anything in Council fleets. Commander Jackson's voice crackled through from the Arcturus sector. Admiral, the Kelvari battle group just dropped out of hyperspace expecting to secure a mining operation. They're currently facing the dreadnought Retribution and her escort squadron. The enemy commander is requesting permission to withdraw. But the most significant revelation was coming from Captain Lee aboard the carrier Devastation in the Outer Rim territories. Admiral, we've intercepted communications from the Council's warfleet. Their intelligence services are expressing severe concern about human ship classifications. Apparently, what they identified as our most advanced vessels were actually our supply ships. Cross allowed herself a slight smile. The irony was perfect. Council arrogance had been so complete that they had never bothered to conduct proper intelligence gathering on human capabilities. They had accepted the carefully crafted deception that humanity presented. A young species with primitive technology, grateful for the opportunity to learn from their advanced neighbors. The reality was that human engineers had been studying alien technology since first contact, improving upon it with innovations that could only come from a species that had bootstrapped itself from cave paintings to interstellar travel in less than 10,000 years. Blake returned with an urgent update. Ma'am, long-range sensors are detecting massive hyperspace signatures. Multiple Council fleets are converging on our position. Preliminary count shows approximately 1,000 vessels from 15 different species. Cross turned to her tactical officer. Commander, what's our defensive status? All systems operational, Admiral. The orbital defense network is fully powered and all stealth platforms are maintaining concealment. Fleet formations are ready to implement Doctrine Prometheus on your command. 1,000 ships cross-mused. They're trying to overwhelm us with numbers. Classic council thinking. If you can't understand your enemy's capabilities, simply bring enough force to overcome any possible resistance. She moved to the command console and activated the fleet communication system. Signal all ships implement Doctrine Prometheus. It's time to show them what human preparations actually look like. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations. The human fleet, which had appeared to consist of roughly 400 vessels, suddenly doubled in size as ships dropped stealth systems that had hidden them completely from alien sensors. Then it doubled again as asteroids and space debris revealed themselves to be heavily armed human platforms. But the real shock came when the apparently empty space around Earth began to shimmer and massive installations materialized as their cloaking fields deactivated. Orbital fortresses emerged from concealment, each one larger than anything in Council military doctrine, and armed with weapons that combined technologies from dozens of alien species, enhanced with improvements that represented the absolute pinnacle of human engineering. The Council fleet, expecting to face a few hundred primitive human ships, found themselves confronting the largest and most advanced defensive network ever constructed. Each fortress alone possessed firepower equivalent to an entire Council battle group, and there were dozens of them positioned throughout the solar system. Cross opened a communication channel to the approaching armada. Council forces, this is Admiral Cross of the Human Defense Force. You are approaching sovereign Earth space with hostile intent. You have exactly 60 seconds to reverse course and withdraw to minimum safe distance. The response came from Admiral Corvex of the Hegemony's Fifth Fleet. His reptilian features twisted with contempt. Human Admiral, you are vastly outnumbered and outgunned. Surrender immediately and your species will be granted the mercy of relocation rather than extermination. Cross exchanged glances with her bridge crew, several of whom were struggling to suppress grins. Admiral Corvex, I'm afraid you've made a critical error in your tactical assessment. You're not outnumbered and you're certainly not outgunned. Blake, please educate the Admiral about actual fleet dispositions. The tactical display updated, revealing the true scope of humanity's preparation. The 1,000 Council ships were indeed facing overwhelming odds, but not in their favor. Hidden throughout the solar system, concealed by stealth technology that surpassed anything the Council possessed, were over 3,000 human vessels. More importantly, the orbital fortresses that had just revealed themselves, each carried more firepower than an entire Council battle group. But the revelation that sent panic through the enemy fleet came when Blake highlighted additional signatures appearing on sensors. Admiral, we're tracking the arrival of our off-world fleets. It appears our colonies weren't as defenseless as Council intelligence suggested. From every corner of human space, additional fleets were arriving, not to defend Earth, which clearly needed no defense with its revealed fortifications, but to demonstrate the scope of humanity's preparation. Every human settlement in the galaxy had been far more than it appeared, and collectively they represented a military force that dwarfed anything the Council had imagined possible. Admiral Corvex, Cross continued, her voice carrying across space to the increasingly nervous Council fleet, you came here believing you were harvesting a primitive species. Instead, you've discovered a civilization that spent 3 decades preparing for this exact moment. I'm going to give you one opportunity to withdraw and report back to your masters. And why would you allow us to retreat? Cross's expression hardened. Because I want every species in the galaxy to know that humanity is no longer hiding behind masks of gratitude and cooperation. The naive civilization that begged for acceptance into your community is gone. In its place stands a power that your Council's arrogance created through 3 decades of deception and planned genocide. She gestured toward the massive fleet surrounding them, toward the fortress installations that bristled with enough firepower to reduce planets to debris, toward the technological marvels that human ingenuity had created from decades of careful study and improvement of alien science. You taught us that the galaxy respects only strength, that mercy is weakness, that survival requires deception. Deep within the Galactic Council's Emergency Command Center on Veltharion Prime, crisis sessions had been running continuously for 96 hours. High Chancellor Zerion stood before holographic displays, showing the catastrophic military situation across Council space, his massive cephalopod form pulsing with stress patterns that indicated extreme agitation. The bioluminescent networks visible through his transparent skin flickered with emergency signals as reports continued streaming, and from the furthest reaches of galactic civilization, the news was uniformly devastating. Intelligence Director Mulvek approached with the latest summary, his four eyes darting nervously between data streams as he prepared to deliver information that would reshape their understanding of the conflict. High Chancellor, human forces have successfully liberated 23 slave colonies in the past 72 hours alone. The Catherian detention facilities are completely offline. The Zelian labor camps have been evacuated, and resistance movements are declaring independence throughout the Outer Rim territories. Military Coordinator Thrake, a massive arthropod whose species had served as the Council's enforcers for 4 centuries, clicked his mandibles in frustrated disbelief. How is this possible? Our intelligence indicated humans possessed minimal military capability beyond basic planetary defense. Their fleet assessments showed primitive vessels with limited range and firepower. Xerion's bioluminescent patterns shifted to deep crimson as another priority transmission arrived. The scale of deception was becoming clear, but the implications were staggering. For 30 years, while presenting themselves as eager junior members of galactic civilization, humans had been systematically studying every aspect of Council operations, mapping their weaknesses, and recruiting allies among the species they had subjugated. Director Mulvek activated a tactical display showing the strategic situation. High Chancellor, the Altarian resistance movements have formally allied with human forces. The Morvac survivors are providing intelligence on hidden Council installations throughout the mid-rim sectors. Even species we considered completely pacified are beginning open rebellion against our authority. But it was the strategic analysis that revealed the true scope of humanity's preparation. Every cultural exchange program, every technical advisory position, every diplomatic mission had been an intelligence-gathering operation. Humans had gained access to Council facilities not through infiltration, but through invitation. The Council had systematically provided their eventual enemies with everything they needed to plan and execute the perfect counterattack. Director Mulvek, Xerion demanded, explain to me how an entire species managed to deceive our intelligence. Services for 3 decades without detection. The Crow. Intelligence Director's form seemed to contract as he prepared to admit the magnitude of their failure. High Chancellor, human operatives didn't infiltrate our operations through conventional espionage. We invited them. For 30 years, we brought them into our most sensitive facilities as cultural exchange participants, technical consultants, and diplomatic observers. We gave them complete access to our technology, our methods, our strategic planning, all while believing they were too primitive to understand what they were learning. The admission sent shockwaves through the assembled Council leadership. Their own integration protocols had been turned against them, weaponized by a species that had pretended gratitude while systematically studying how to destroy their hosts. Worse, analysis of captured human technology suggested they hadn't just copied Council systems. They had improved them beyond original specifications. Furthermore, Mulvek continued reluctantly, examination of human weapons platforms indicates they incorporated design elements from 17 different Council species, but with modifications that exceed our original capabilities by significant margins. They didn't just steal our technology, they enhanced it using innovations we never considered. Thrake's massive form shifted aggressively. Then we mobilized the entire Council Navy and crushed them with overwhelming numbers. No single species, regardless of technological advantages, can stand against the combined military might of 47 civilizations. About that strategic option, Molovec said, his voice becoming smaller with each word. Current intelligence indicates that 19 Council member species have already requested ceasefire negotiations with human forces. The Altarian Assembly voted yesterday to withdraw from all military operations. The Zenthari Confederation is demanding immediate peace talks. Cowards, Thrake roared, his mandibles clicking furiously. We should execute their leadership for treason against the established order. It's not cowardice, Xerion said quietly, his bioluminescent patterns now a deep, troubled blue. It's rational calculation based on tactical realities. Show them the analysis from the Arcturus Station engagement. The holographic display shifted to show the aftermath of what military historians would later call the Battle of Arcturus Station. A Council enforcement fleet of 400 ships had attempted to secure what appeared to be a human mining colony, expecting to find industrial workers and basic orbital defenses. Instead, they had encountered a military installation disguised as a civilian operation. The mining ships had revealed themselves to be heavily armed warships. The ore processing facilities had dropped their camouflage to become weapons platforms that outgunned Council battleships. The civilian population had transformed into a fully equipped military garrison with personal weapons that surpassed Council infantry standards. The engagement had lasted exactly 18 minutes. Of the 400 Council vessels, 61 had been destroyed, 243 had been captured intact, and 96 had been allowed to escape, but only after their crews witnessed human medics treating wounded Council personnel with the same care provided to their own casualties. "Do you understand what this represents?" Zarion asked the assembled commanders. This wasn't just a military defeat. This was a demonstration. Humans could have annihilated that entire fleet, but instead they chose precision and restraint. They're showing the galaxy that they fight with both overwhelming capability and moral authority, qualities that make them appear more civilized than us. Director Molvek activated another display showing intercepted communications. Intelligence indicates that humans are broadcasting footage of Council prisoner treatment throughout galactic networks. Our own personnel are providing testimony that human forces offer medical care, proper nutrition, and humane detention conditions. This is generating significant propaganda advantages for their cause among neutral species. The irony was devastating. For centuries, the Council had maintained control through fear and overwhelming force, suppressing dissent by making brutal examples of species that attempted resistance. Now they faced an enemy that combined technological superiority with moral authority, turning every engagement into evidence that an alternative to Council rule was not only possible but preferable. "High Chancellor," came a voice from the Chamber's communication array. "We're receiving a priority transmission from Admiral Cross of the Human Defense Force. She's requesting permission to address the Council leadership directly." Zarion's massive form darkened with resignation. "Put her through." The holographic display shifted to show Admiral Cross on the bridge of her flagship, her expression calm but determined. Behind her, bridge personnel moved with the quiet efficiency of professionals who understood they held overwhelming advantages in every category that mattered for this conflict. "High Chancellor Zarion," Cross began without diplomatic preamble. "I'm contacting you to discuss terms for ending this conflict before it escalates to levels that serve no one's interests." "Terms?" Thrake interjected, his mandibles clicking aggressively. "You are one species against the combined authority of the galactic community." Cross's expression didn't change. "Coordinator Thrake, in the past 96 hours, human forces have successfully engaged Council fleets in 63 separate systems. We have captured over 1,000 Council vessels, liberated 47 slave colonies, and disrupted your supply networks across 8 sectors. Additionally, 12 Council member species have formally requested to join what they're calling the Human Coalition." She paused to let the statistics register. This isn't a conflict between one species and the galactic community. This is a revolution by the galactic community against the Council's system of oppression, with humanity providing the catalyst and coordination that makes effective resistance possible. The truth of her statement was undeniable. Reports flooding in from across the galaxy confirmed that the Council's carefully maintained facade of legitimate authority was crumbling as subject species declared independence and requested human protection. The rebellion was spreading through communication networks faster than Council forces could respond. "What are your terms?" Zarion asked, his bioluminescent patterns indicating reluctant acceptance of tactical realities. "Complete withdrawal of Council enforcement operations from all disputed territories. Formal recognition of the independence of species that choose to leave the Council structure. Immediate cessation of all slave labor operations and release of detained populations, and establishment of neutral zones where former Council subjects can rebuild their civi." The massive conference chamber aboard the human flagship Defiance had been hastily reconfigured to accommodate delegates from 57 different species. Admiral Cross watched from the command observation deck as beings who had been enemies or strangers just days earlier worked together to establish what was being called the Free Galactic Coalition. The transformation was remarkable, but what struck her most was how naturally these diverse species had adapted to human organizational principles. Ambassador Kane, still bearing the ceremonial markings from his confrontation with the Council, served as the primary coordinator. But the real work was being accomplished by species that had lived under Council oppression for generations and were now experiencing their first opportunity to participate in genuine self-governance. The Morvac delegation has submitted their infrastructure requirements, announced Dr. Rebecca Foster, humanities chief xenocultural specialist who had become the coalition's integration coordinator. They need atmospheric processors for 17 different world types and medical facilities capable of treating genetic damage from 3 centuries of Council experiments. Representatives from the Alterian resistance, survivors of systematic cultural suppression, activated their translation devices to respond. Humans honor agreements. Council made promises, delivered enslavement. Alterian people choose human leadership over Council deception. It was a sentiment that echoed throughout the chamber. Species after species rose to share their experiences under Council rule. Forced labor operations, unauthorized medical experimentation, cultural destruction, and systematic resource extraction that had reduced entire civilizations to subsistence, while their worlds were stripped of everything valuable. But what impressed Cross most profoundly was how quickly these diverse civilizations had embraced human governance concepts. Instead of the rigid hierarchies that characterized Council administration, the coalition operated through consultation, consensus, and voluntary cooperation. It was an approach that came naturally to a species that had unified their own world through negotiation rather than conquest. Admiral, Commander Blake approached with a comprehensive update. Our reconnaissance teams have completed detailed surveys of the liberated territories. The scale of Council operations exceeded even our worst projections. Cross reviewed the intelligence data with growing outrage. The Council hadn't just been exploiting individual worlds. They had been systematically dismantling entire star systems, while forcing native populations into labor camps designed to break their cultural identity. Worse, they had been conducting biological experiments aimed at creating more compliant slave species through genetic modification. "How many systems are we talking about?" she asked. 423 confirmed slave operations. Another 97 worlds that appear to be research facilities focused on biological modification. And at least 58 star systems where the original populations have been completely eliminated and replaced with Council administrators. The scope was staggering. For over 6 centuries, the Council had maintained their power structure through systematic oppression on a scale that dwarfed any historical atrocity. They had perfected civilizational predation, presenting themselves as benevolent governors while conducting what amounted to galactic genocide for profit. "Ma'am," Blake continued, "we're also receiving reports that several Council core worlds are experiencing internal uprisings. Apparently there were resistance movements we never detected, and our liberation campaigns have inspired them to open rebellion against their own governments." It was exactly what human strategists had hoped for, but hadn't dared to expect. The Council's facade of absolute control was crumbling, as subject populations realized that effective resistance was not only possible, but succeeding. Human forces had provided the catalyst, but the revolution was spreading through galactic society's own networks. "Admiral Cross," came a voice from behind her. She turned to see Ambassador Kane approaching with a delegation of coalition leaders representing 12 different species. "We need to discuss the Council's latest communication." They moved to a secure briefing room where the holographic display showed High Chancellor Xerion, his massive cephalopod form pulsing with stress patterns that indicated extreme desperation. The message had been transmitted simultaneously to every coalition facility throughout the galaxy. "Representatives of the Free Galactic Coalition," Xerion began, the words clearly difficult for him to articulate. "The Council acknowledges that our previous administrative policies contained significant oversights that may have caused unnecessary hardships. For certain populations," Kane made a sound of disgust. "Oversights. They're calling 6 centuries of systematic slavery and genocide administrative oversights. The Council is prepared to enter comprehensive negotiations for a permanent peace agreement. The message continued. We propose a return to the previous system with substantial modifications to address legitimate concerns raised by affected populations. The hologram flickered as Xerion leaned forward with obvious desperation. However, we must emphasize that the current state of galactic instability threatens all civilized species. The Council has maintained order and prosperity for over a millennium. Without proper administrative oversight, chaos and barbarism will inevitably follow. Cross exchanged glances with Kane as the message concluded. It was exactly the response they had predicted. The Council was trying to position itself as the galaxy's necessary evil, the only force capable of maintaining civilization despite its admitted flaws. What's our assessment of their remaining military capabilities? She asked Blake, significantly degraded. Intelligence networks indicate that 23 member species have formally withdrawn from Council military obligations. Another 18 are in various stages of rebellion. The core Council species still control approximately 30% of their original forces, but they're dispersed across multiple fronts trying to maintain control of their remaining territories. Dr. Foster activated a strategic display showing economic analysis. More importantly, their infrastructure is collapsing rapidly. The slave labor that drove Council prosperity has been eliminated, and they lack the industrial capacity to maintain their technology without it. It was the fundamental weakness that human analysts had identified years earlier. The Council's entire civilization was built on exploitation, making them completely dependent on subject species for everything from basic manufacturing to advanced research. Without their slaves, they were discovering that their vaunted technological superiority was largely dependent on others' labor. They're offering to negotiate because they have no alternative, Kane observed. The question is whether we accept their surrender or complete what we started. Cross considered the strategic options. Military victory was certainly achievable. Human forces could likely capture or destroy every remaining Council installation within months. But the cost would be enormous, not just in resources, but in the very principles that had made the coalition possible. There's another factor we must consider, Dr. Foster added. We're receiving reports of massive refugee movements throughout former Council space. Hundreds of millions of beings who were displaced by Council policies are attempting to return to their ancestral worlds. But many of those systems are now uninhabitable or occupied by other species. The humanitarian crisis was overwhelming. Centuries of Council population manipulation had created an incredibly complex web of displaced peoples, destroyed ecosystems, and cultural upheaval that would require generations to resolve properly. Simply winning the military conflict would be meaningless if the coalition couldn't build a stable and just civilization afterward. Admiral, Kane said quietly, there's something else we need to address. Our diplomatic teams have been analyzing communication patterns from neutral species throughout the galaxy. They're becoming concerned about the Council, about us. Kane activated another display showing intercepted communications from unaligned civilizations. They see human military efficiency, our rapid technological advancement, our expanding influence across the galaxy. Some of them are worried that we're simply replacing one dominant power with another. Cross felt a chill as she realized the implications. Humanity had spent 30 years carefully building the image of a peaceful, cooperative species. Now, in a matter of weeks, they had revealed themselves to be the most formidable military power the galaxy had ever seen. To outside observers, the distinction between liberation and conquest might not be immediately apparent. We need to make a fundamental choice, she said finally. We can destroy the Council completely and risk becoming what we fought against, or we can find a way to transform this conflict into something that builds a genuinely better galaxy. The room fell silent as the weight of the decision settled over them. They possessed the power to reshape galactic civilization completely, but power itself became corrupting if not wielded with extreme care and wisdom. What do you recommend, Admiral? Kane asked. Cross looked out at the stars visible through the chamber's reinforced viewports, thinking of the billions of beings whose futures hung in the balance. We accept their surrender, but strictly on our terms. Complete dissolution of the Council governmental. 1 year after the Council's surrender, Admiral Cross stood on the observation deck of Unity Station, the massive orbital facility that had become the headquarters of the Free Galactic Coalition. Through the transparent aluminum viewports, she could see ships from over 80 different species moving in harmonious coordination, Not the rigid formations of military necessity, but the organic flow of a thriving civilization. The transformation had exceeded every optimistic projection human planners had dared to imagine. Final reports from the Truth and Reconciliation Tribunals, Ambassador Kane announced, approaching with a comprehensive data compilation that represented humanity's most ambitious undertaking. For 12 months, teams of human investigators working alongside coalition partners had been documenting the complete scope of Council crimes against galactic civilization, creating an historical record that would ensure such atrocities could never be forgotten or repeated. What are the final numbers? Cross asked, though she already understood the magnitude would be staggering. 539 enslaved species across 1,400 worlds. Over 12 billion beings killed through systematic exploitation, unauthorized medical experiments, or outright genocide for resource extraction. Economic damage that the economists describe as incalculable, representing the systematic theft of entire civilizations' wealth over 6 centuries. Cross nodded grimly. The scale of atrocity had surpassed even their worst estimates, making the coalition's decision to pursue justice rather than revenge feel even more historically significant. They could have simply obliterated every Council core world and claimed moral justification. Instead, they had chosen the far more difficult path of building something genuinely better. How are the former Council species adapting to coalition governance principles? Kane's expression brightened considerably. Better than anyone anticipated. The Altarian Assembly has voted to implement coalition organizational structures throughout their entire territory. The Xanthari Confederation is requesting technical assistance to convert their military-industrial infrastructure to civilian production. Even the hegemony's former leadership has agreed to participate fully in the reparations program. It was the coalition's most revolutionary innovation. Rather than punishing entire species for their government's historical crimes, they had created pathways for genuine transformation and redemption. Former Council worlds could maintain their cultural independence, while joining cooperative networks that shared technology and resources for mutual benefit. Dr. Foster's rehabilitation teams have achieved remarkable success, Kane continued. We've successfully restored atmospheric systems on 67 formerly enslaved worlds, and the genetic damage from Council experiments is proving far more treatable than we initially feared. Most populations should achieve complete biological recovery within 2 generations. But it was the next report that truly demonstrated the scope of galactic transformation. Admiral, I need to show you the latest territorial survey results from our Outer Rim expeditions. The holographic display activated, showing a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy, with different colored indicators representing various political affiliations and organizational structures. What Cross saw made her pause in genuine amazement. The overwhelming majority of galactic civilization was now either directly allied with the coalition or had independently adopted coalition governance principles. We're not looking at conquered territory, Kane explained. These represent voluntary associations and independent adoptions. Species throughout the galaxy have chosen to reorganize their societies around the principles we've demonstrated: voluntary cooperation, open technological sharing, and mutual defense agreements based on common interests rather than domination. The transformation had occurred faster than anyone had predicted. As documentation of coalition policies spread through galactic communication networks, species being treated as genuine equals, technology shared freely, disputes resolved through negotiation rather than force, civilizations throughout the galaxy had begun requesting integration or implementing similar structures independently. What about organized resistance movements? Virtually eliminated, Kane reported. The few remaining Council hardliners have retreated to isolated systems in the galactic core, but they lack the resources to pose any meaningful threat. More significantly, their own populations are abandoning them in increasing numbers. Even High Chancellor Zerion has requested asylum within Coalition space. Cross raised an eyebrow at that unexpected development. Asylum? The former leader of galactic oppression wants our protection? He's offering complete testimony about Council operational structures in exchange for protection from revenge-seeking species. His information could help us locate hidden facilities and identify displaced populations that we haven't yet discovered. It was a decision that would define the Coalition's fundamental character. Xerion had been one of the primary architects of galactic oppression, directly responsible for countless atrocities across multiple centuries. But he also possessed information that could save lives and restore communities that had been scattered across the galaxy. What's the recommendation from the Ethics Council? Conditional asylum with strict supervision, complete cooperation with ongoing investigations, comprehensive testimony about all Council operations, and permanent residence on a neutral world under observation. No legal punishment beyond loss of political power, and permanent exclusion from any governance roles. Cross nodded approvingly. It was exactly the kind of solution that would have been impossible under the Council's binary approach to justice, but which perfectly reflected humanity's understanding of complex moral problems. Justice didn't always require destruction. Sometimes it required transformation and the wisdom to choose rehabilitation over revenge. Approved. What else requires attention? The most remarkable development is actually economic, Kane said, bringing up a comprehensive display of trade network analysis. Coalition commercial relationships are generating prosperity levels that exceed anything the galaxy has experienced historically. When you eliminate the parasitic extraction that characterized Council economics, voluntary cooperation proves incredibly efficient. The data was extraordinary. Freed from the burden of supporting Council hierarchies and military expenses, coalition worlds were experiencing unprecedented technological advancement and rapidly improving living standards. More importantly, innovations were spreading freely through the network. Rather than being hoarded by dominant species for competitive advantage, we're witnessing the emergence of hybrid technologies that combine knowledge from dozens of different species, Kane continued enthusiastically. Medical advances that integrate Alterian biotechnology with human innovation, and Morvac neural sciences. Engineering projects that merge traditional materials, science with coalition energy systems and computational methods. But the most significant change was philosophical and cultural. For the first time in recorded galactic history, civilizations were working together as genuine equals rather than in hierarchical relationships based on dominance and submission. The result was an explosion of creativity and innovation that was already producing technologies that surpassed anything the Council had achieved during their millennium of rule. Admiral, Commander Blake approached with a formal communication request. We're receiving a delegation proposal from the Outer Rim Collective. They're requesting a comprehensive alliance structure that would integrate their territories with ours. The Outer Rim Collective represented over 200 species that had never been part of either the Council or the Coalition, maintaining independence through isolation and complex mutual defense agreements. Their request for formal alliance was historically significant, indicating that even neutral civilizations recognized the Coalition as the legitimate successor to galactic leadership. What are their proposed terms? Mutual defense agreements, comprehensive technology sharing, and formal recognition of Coalition principles throughout their space. In exchange, they're offering to integrate their territory into our communication networks and trade systems. It would effectively triple the size of Coalition influence. Cross considered the implications carefully. Accepting the alliance would cement the Coalition's position as the galaxy's dominant power, but it would also increase their responsibilities enormously. Every species that joined the Coalition became their obligation to protect, support, and help develop according to their own cultural values. There's one more development, Kane added quietly. Earth's government has been considering the possibility of formal transition to Coalition governance structures. That brought Cross up short. Earth wants to dissolve traditional national governments? Not dissolve, but evolve them. The same principles that work effectively for interstellar cooperation are being applied to human society. Voluntary association, resource sharing, technological cooperation. Early implementation trials have shown remarkable results in reducing conflict and improving living standards. It was the logical conclusion of humanity's galactic experience, having learned that cooperation worked far better than competition on an interstellar scale. Human societies were beginning to apply those lessons to their own world. The species that'd unify,